Imagine ruling half the world, roads stretching thousands of miles, armies unmatched, cities glittering with wealth. Rome was unstoppable, or so it thought. But what if I told you its collapse didn't come from a single invasion, but from within? Corruption, greed, overexpansion, the mighty empire slowly crumbled, piece by piece. So what really caused the fall of the greatest empire in history? Let's uncover the truth behind Rome's shocking downfall.
Hey guys, tonight we're drifting way back to a world of marble villas, sandal straps, and people who thought bathing once a week made you a hero. So, get comfortable, dim the lights, maybe grab some tea, or if you're historically accurate, a cup of wine watered down to sadness. Because tonight, we're gliding through the long, slow, and honestly kind of pathetic story of how the mighty Roman Empire, that shining, dramatic colossus of the ancient world, didn't so much explode as it fizzled out. This isn't the story of a big battle or a single villain twirling his toga while Rome burns. No, this is about centuries of small cracks. Greed, laziness, bad management, and a few too many guys named Caesar pretending they were gods. Let's start where things still looked good. Rome. The peak before the hangover. By the 2nd century CE, Rome was the closest thing the ancient world had to a global superpower. They controlled everything from the Scottish border to the sands of Egypt, from Spain to Syria. They had roads, aqueducts, public baths, fancy amphitheaters, and of course, a steady stream of slaves doing most of the work. The Pax Romana, the so-called Roman peace, had been rolling along for almost 200 years. Emperors like Trajan and Hadrian were busy building monuments, collecting taxes, and pretending they totally cared about the Senate's opinions. But you know that feeling when everything's too good for too long? Yeah, the Roman Empire had hit that point. Like an overconfident trust fund kid, it had more land than it could handle and more money than it knew what to do with. The borders were massive. The armies were stretched thin. The emperors were starting to act like gods, and not even the cool kind. By the time we reach Emperor Commodus, yes, the guy from Gladiator, though less handsome and more of a narcissistic brat, the empire was already wobbling. Commodus, the emperor's first red flag. So, Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, the guy who wrote meditations full of stoic wisdom about self-control and virtue. And then there's Commodus, the exact opposite of that. Imagine being raised by a man who tells you, do not be distracted by trifles, and deciding, you know what, I want to rename Rome after myself. Which he did. For a while, he tried calling the city Colonia Commodonia. Yes, the man literally tried to rebrand Rome, like a toddler scribbling his name on the wall and calling it art. He loved gladiator games, not watching them, being in them, which for an emperor was sort of like your boss suddenly deciding he wants to wrestle interns for fun. He dressed like Hercules, carried a club, and strutted around half naked because apparently divine delusion was the new black. When Commodus was finally strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner, yes, that's real, people probably thought, okay, good, back to normal. But Rome's problems didn't end there. They'd just begun to metastasize. The 3rd century, a century of chaos and terrible job security. So, fast forward a bit. After Commodus's untimely bath time exit, Rome plunged into what historians politely call the crisis of the 3rd century. Translation, complete political dumpster fire. Between 235 and 284 CE, the empire went through about 26 emperors. That's roughly one every 2 years. Some ruled for a few months, some for a few weeks. One guy, Gordian I, ruled for 21 days before unaliving himself because his co-emperor's son lost a battle. If you worked in Imperial Rome's HR department, you probably didn't bother printing business cards. Assassination became the leading cause of career termination. Generals declared themselves emperor every time they won a battle, the army followed whoever promised the biggest bonuses, and the Senate mostly just sat there sighing. Meanwhile, the economy was tanking. To pay for the endless wars and bribes, Emperors started minting more coins, but with less silver, which is basically the ancient equivalent of printing monopoly money. Inflation soared, trade slowed, and people started hoarding gold like doomsday preppers. Barbarian tribes, the Goths, the Vandals, the Franks, were testing Rome's defenses. And inside the empire? Plague, famine, political murder. The empire was too big, too fragile, and run by people who couldn't agree on who was in charge for more than 15 minutes. So yeah, not great. Diocletian, the guy who tried to fix everything and sort of did. In 284 CE, this no-nonsense soldier from Dalmatia, modern-day Croatia, decided, okay, enough chaos, let's clean this up. And he actually did for a while. Diocletian was one of those tough-love emperors, the kind who probably alphabetized his sword collection. He reorganized the empire into a system called the Tetrarchy, 4 rulers, each handling a different region, 2 senior emperors, called Augusti, and 2 juniors, called Caesars. It was like a power-sharing plan designed by someone who didn't trust anyone. It worked, kind of. The empire got more stable, the borders were better defended, and the bureaucracy, already enormous, became a glorious nightmare of paperwork. He also tried fixing the economy by setting maximum prices on goods and making tax collection brutally efficient, which, as you might guess, made everyone hate him. He was also very into persecuting Christians. He thought they were ruining the old Roman religion, so he launched one of the harshest crackdowns in imperial history. Then, in 305 CE, he did something no Roman emperor had ever done before. He retired. He moved to his palace in what's now split Croatia, grew cabbages, and basically said, "You guys handle it." And when people begged him to come back, he famously said, "If you could see the vegetables I grow, you wouldn't ask," which honestly is iconic. But once Diocletian left, surprise, the empire went right back to chaos. Constantine, one emperor to rule them all and move the capital. After another round of civil wars, a guy named Constantine took over. Yes, that Constantine, the one who saw a cross in the sky and made Christianity legal. Constantine the Great was a big deal. He reunited the empire under one ruler, rebuilt order, and founded a brand new capital, Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Why? Because Rome was basically falling apart. Too many senators, too many mobs, and probably too much sewage in the streets. Constantinople was fresh, defensible, rich, and strategically placed between Europe and Asia. And Constantine made sure it sparkled. Temples, churches, palaces, walls, the works. He also shifted Rome's identity. Christianity, once a fringe religion, now became the empire's spiritual core. That's right, from worshiping Jupiter and Mars to praying in basilicas. It was a huge cultural shift, one that would echo for the next 1,000 years. But even Constantine couldn't fix everything. The empire was like a tired old machine patched with duct tape and divine symbols. It kept running, barely. After Constantine, the long decline you could see coming. After Constantine's death in 337 CE, things went back to, well, normal Roman dysfunction. His sons immediately started fighting over who got what piece of the empire, and so began another round of civil wars, assassinations, and general backstabbing. Meanwhile, the empire's frontiers were under constant pressure. Barbarian groups, many of them displaced by migrating Huns, started pouring into Roman lands. At first, they came as refugees, then as invaders. And Rome, exhausted, started hiring them as mercenaries. Because when your own soldiers won't fight for you anymore, you outsource. It was a bit like paying someone to guard your house and then realizing they've moved into your living room. The economy was still fragile. Taxes were crushing the poor, and the once great Roman cities were starting to crumble. By the late 3rd century, the Western Empire was basically on life support. Let's float over to the inevitable split. In 395 CE, Emperor Theodosius I officially split the empire in two: the Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople, and the Western Roman Empire, still trying to function from Rome, Ravenna, or wherever the latest emperor wasn't being murdered. The East had money, trade, and defensible borders. The West had memories. The West was overextended, underfunded, and run by emperors who often ruled for less time than a loaf of bread stayed fresh. And that's where the slow fade of Roman glory truly began.
The year is 395 CE. The Roman Empire has officially been divided into two halves because apparently one giant mess wasn't enough. Now they needed two smaller messes. The Eastern Empire, based in Constantinople, was doing all right. Strong trade routes, rich cities, solid leadership. The Western Empire, meanwhile, was kind of like a broke cousin who still shows up to family dinners pretending everything's fine while quietly pawning the silverware. Rome itself was still grand in name, but the city was decaying. The marble still shone in the moonlight. The forum still echoed with arguments, but the real power had already started drifting eastward. Theodosius is dead, and so is the stability. When Emperor Theodosius I died in 395, he left the empire to his two sons, Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west. Now, Arcadius wasn't exactly inspiring, but Honorius, he's remembered as one of the most useless rulers in all of Roman history, and that's saying something. He was just a teenager when he became emperor, which, okay, not his fault, but he was sheltered, indecisive, and had the leadership instincts of a sleepy turtle. The real power behind him was a general named Stilicho, a half-Roman, half-Vandal military man who was actually confident. For years, Stilicho held the Western Empire together through sheer willpower and a lot of emergency patchwork. He was the kind of guy who could fix a collapsing province while juggling two barbarian invasions and an imperial tantrum. But Rome being Rome, it didn't trust him because, he wasn't quote-unquote pure Roman enough. Enter Alaric I, leader of the Visigoths. They'd been allies of Rome once, even fought for the empire, but they were tired of being treated like second-class citizens and unpaid interns. So Alaric decided, fine, we'll just take what we need. He marched his people into Roman territory, not as raiders at first, but as refugees. They wanted food, land, and recognition. Rome, as usual, responded with bureaucracy and arrogance. So the Goths started looting towns. Negotiations turned to battles, battles turned to sieges, and slowly the Visigoths pushed closer to the city of Rome itself. Stilicho tried to handle it. He even paid off Alaric once to go away, which worked temporarily because gold solves many problems until you run out of it. But in 408 CE, Honorius, egged on by paranoid courtiers, had Stilicho executed. Yes, the one guy holding everything together, gone. The army lost faith, the borders crumbled, the Goths, seeing an opportunity, decided, why not? 410 CE, Rome falls for the first time in 800 years. Alaric and his army surrounded Rome. They cut off food supplies, they starved the population, and eventually, on August 24th, 410 CE, the unimaginable happened. The city of Rome was sacked. The eternal city, the symbol of imperial power, the heart of civilization, was looted by barbarian soldiers who probably couldn't believe their luck. For 3 days, the Goths ransacked the city. They took gold, silver, statues, and plenty of wine. Churches were spared. Alaric was Christian, but most of the rest wasn't. It wasn't the apocalyptic destruction you might imagine. Rome didn't burn to the ground, but symbolically, it was a gut punch heard around the world. People couldn't process it. St. Jerome, writing from Bethlehem, said, "The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken." Honorius, safely hiding in Ravenna, a swampy, well-defended city he refused to leave, reportedly thought his pet chicken named Rome had died. That's how disconnected he was. So, yes, Rome fell, and the emperor was mourning a chicken. Let's float over to the Vandal problem. After the sack of Rome, things didn't get better. The Visigoths eventually moved on, heading into southern Gaul and Spain, and then came the Vandals, a group whose name would later literally define the word vandalism. They crossed into Roman territory around 406, slipped past defenses, and by 429 had made it all the way into North Africa, Rome's breadbasket. North Africa was crucial. It produced most of the grain that fed the western cities. Without it, the West was like a starving giant. By 439, the Vandals had taken Carthage, one of the richest cities in the empire. They even built a navy because, apparently, why not stop at looting when you can also pirate? From there, they raided the Mediterranean coastlines like it was a new sport. Sicily, Italy, even Rome again, no one was safe. And yes, in 455 CE, they sacked Rome again. This time, it was less violent, more systematic. They spent 2 full weeks stripping the city bare. Statues, gold, jewels, all packed onto ships and sailed back to Carthage. The once mighty capital of the Western Empire had become an open buffet for whoever showed up next. Meanwhile, in the East, the smart kids are fine. While the West was busy imploding, the Eastern Roman Empire, soon to be known as the Byzantine Empire, was doing pretty well, actually. Constantinople was rich, well-fortified, and had leaders who knew how to play politics. They bribed invaders, negotiated treaties, and generally avoided the stab everyone until morale improves strategy. They also had money, lots of it. Trade with Asia and the Mediterranean was thriving. So when people talk about the fall of Rome, what they usually mean is just the western half. The Eastern Empire would go on for another 1,000 years, watching its western sibling rot quietly in the corner. Back in the West, the puppet show continues. After 455, the Western Empire was basically an Emperor of the Month club. Most were installed by powerful generals or barbarian warlords, ruled briefly, and vanished. There was Ricimer, a half-Germanic general who never became emperor himself, but picked and replaced emperors like he was changing socks. And honestly, he might have been the most effective politician left in Rome. By now, the empire had no real army of its own. Most of its soldiers were mercenaries, Goths, Huns, Vandals, fighting for pay or loot. Roman citizens had lost the will to fight. Taxes were crushing, the countryside was lawless, and the Senate was still holding meetings, bless their hearts, pretending someone cared. Let's drift toward the end. By the mid-470s, the Western Empire was little more than a name. Italy itself was ruled more by foreign generals than Roman nobles. The last emperor, the one that historians like to mark as the final nail in the coffin, was Romulus Augustulus. Even his name felt like fate's bad joke. Romulus, the legendary founder of Rome, Augustus, the title of its first true emperor. And yet, he was just a boy, maybe 15, placed on the throne in 475 by his father, Orestes, who was the real power behind the scenes. Orestes refused to give land to his mercenaries, mostly Germanic soldiers, led by a man named Odoacer. So, naturally, they rebelled. In 476 CE, Odoacer marched on Ravenna, deposed Romulus Augustulus, and politely sent him into retirement. No dramatic execution, no bloodshed, just a quiet end to an exhausted empire. Odoacer sent the imperial regalia to the Eastern Emperor in Constantinople, essentially saying, "Here, we're done. You can keep the title." And that was it. After more than 1,000 years, from republic to empire, from Julius Caesar to Constantine to a kid named Romulus, the Western Roman Empire was no more.
Rome has officially face-planted into history. The barbarians are picking through the rubble, the emperors are mostly unemployed, and the Senate is still holding meetings out of sheer denial. But let's be honest. The empire didn't fall because one barbarian with great cheekbones decided to knock on the gate. It fell because Rome, glorious, arrogant Rome, had been quietly rotting from the inside for centuries. Let's start with the big, ugly elephant in the forum, the economy. The economic collapse, the wallet of an empire. Imagine running a vast empire, millions of people, thousands of miles of borders, and realizing you have no idea how to pay for it. That was basically Rome after the 2nd century. At its peak, Rome's economy ran on conquest. You take land, you steal their stuff, you tax the survivors, and you use that money to fund more conquest. It's the ancient world's version of a pyramid scheme, except the pyramids were real. But once the empire stopped expanding, because honestly there were no new easy targets left, the cash flow dried up. Suddenly, the empire was spending more than it made. Armies had to be paid, roads had to be repaired, senators had to be bribed. And with no new loot pouring in, taxes went up and up and up. Now here's the twist. Rich people didn't pay much. If you were a senator or an elite landowner, you had ways to negotiate your tax bill, which usually meant avoiding it completely. So who paid? The farmers, the laborers, the small landowners who couldn't escape the tax collector. Over time, people started abandoning their land because it was cheaper to run away than to pay taxes. And when farmers stop farming, well, you can guess what happens to your food supply. The inflation situation. To make things worse, the government started debasing their currency. The silver denarius, Rome's main coin, used to be nearly pure silver. By the 3rd century, it was basically a tin disc pretending to be valuable. It's like printing money until your cash feels like confetti. Prices soared, merchants stopped trusting coins, trade slowed down, and the government responded the only way it knew, by minting even more worthless coins. At one point, Diocletian tried to fix this with an edict on maximum prices, which basically told everyone what they could charge for things. If you broke the rule, you could be executed, because nothing says economic stability like murdering shopkeepers. Shockingly, it didn't work. The military mess. Too big, too broke, too barbarian. Now, let's drift over to the army, once the pride of Rome, the disciplined killing machine that conquered continents. By the late Empire, the legions were different. Recruitment had dropped. Roman citizens didn't want to fight anymore, probably because the pay was terrible and the life expectancy was worse. So Rome started hiring foederati, foreign soldiers, often Germanic tribes, who fought in exchange for land or gold. Basically, mercenaries. They were effective in battle, sure, but loyal? Not really. When the gold stopped flowing, they switched sides faster than you could say Ave Caesar. Even worse, many of the empire's best generals, like Stilicho, Aetius, and Ricimer, were of barbarian origin themselves, which is fine in theory, but politically it made Romans uneasy. So the empire's defense depended on people they didn't trust fighting against people they were related to. What could possibly go wrong? The bureaucracy. Death by paperwork. Now, let's talk about everyone's favorite subject, government paperwork. The Roman Empire, especially in its later years, had so much administration. Diocletian had divided the empire into smaller provinces to make it more efficient. In reality, it just meant more governors, more offices, more taxes, more confusion. By the 4th century, the imperial bureaucracy was eating up the budget. Every province had officials for tax collection, census taking, grain supply, customs, roads, and about 12 other things no one understood. And all of them were corrupt. Bribes, nepotism, missing funds, it was all part of the job description. Even the historian Ammianus Marcellinus, a Roman officer, once wrote that officials fleeced the provinces like sheep, which sounds harsh but accurate. The result? A bloated system where no one knew who was actually in charge, and everything took 5 times longer than necessary. It's the ancient version of calling a government office and being transferred 8 times before they hang up on you. The moral decline, or so the old guys said. Now, Roman historians, especially the cranky ones, love to say that the empire fell because people got lazy and immoral, that the old Roman virtues of discipline, modesty, and hard work were gone. To be fair, they might have had a point. By the 4th century, the rich elite were building massive villas in the countryside, decorating them with mosaics of themselves pretending to be gods. They threw endless parties while peasants starved. Public service became something to avoid, not an honor. Even senators didn't want to live in Rome anymore. Too many mobs, too many taxes, and not enough marble polishers. And the ordinary citizens? Many had grown dependent on government handouts, free grain, free games, and the occasional, "we're still great" parade. Juvenal had joked centuries earlier about the people caring only for bread and circuses. By the late empire, it wasn't a joke anymore. It was policy. Christianity and the cultural shift. Now, let's wade carefully into the religious pool. Because yes, Christianity changed everything. And no, it wasn't the cause of the fall, but it definitely shifted the empire's vibe. Before Constantine, Rome's religion was a giant buffet of gods. Jupiter, Mars, Venus, household spirits, imported deities, everyone had their favorite. Religion was public, political, and tied directly to state power. Then, Constantine legalized Christianity, and eventually, Theodosius made it the official state religion. Temples closed, pagan rituals were banned, the old priesthoods lost their funding. The focus shifted from empire and glory to heaven and salvation. And while that's not bad, it did change priorities. Many elites started joining the church instead of the military or politics. Money that once went into roads or armies now funded monasteries and basilicas. Even art and education began to revolve around religious themes rather than civic pride. The empire's identity, that sense of "we are Rome, masters of the world," began to dissolve. Overexpansion, the empire that couldn't stop growing. Rome's borders, at their height, covered over 5 million square kilometers. That's a lot of real estate to maintain, especially with slow communication, slow transportation, and emperors who couldn't even control their own guards. It's like defending those borders required massive armies and constant vigilance. From the Rhine to the Euphrates, it was an endless game of whack-a-barbarian. The empire spent more on defense than it could afford. And every time a new emperor took over, he'd promise to restore the frontiers, which usually meant another expensive war, another round of taxes, and another reason for farmers to flee. It's like trying to fix a leaky roof by building a second house on top of it. Eventually, Rome just stopped trying. They abandoned distant provinces, let local generals handle things, and hoped for the best. Spoiler, the best never came. Political chaos. Everyone wanted the throne. Another classic problem. Too many emperors, not enough stability. From the 3rd to 5th centuries, nearly every emperor died violently. Assassination, rebellion, coup, civil war, you name it. The imperial throne became the world's most dangerous chair. The Senate had lost all real power. The army decided who ruled, and soldiers cared more about getting paid than about who wore the purple robe. Every time a new emperor rose, someone else declared himself emperor across the border. Civil wars drained resources, weakened defenses, and left the empire vulnerable. At one point, there were literally 3 emperors at once, all claiming legitimacy. It's like having 3 CEOs of the same collapsing company, all firing each other while the building's on fire. Plague, famine, and just general bad luck. As if all that weren't enough, nature decided to join the fun. Several major plagues hit the empire: the Antonine Plague in the 2nd century, the Cyprian Plague in the 3rd, and various smaller outbreaks later. They wiped out huge chunks of the population, soldiers, farmers, city dwellers alike. With fewer workers, food production fell. With fewer taxpayers, revenues fell. And with fewer soldiers, the borders weakened even more. It was a domino effect of misery. Add in occasional famines, droughts, and earthquakes, and you've got an empire that felt cursed long before the barbarians ever showed up. So, why did Rome really fall? It wasn't one thing. It was everything.
If you're still here, congratulations. You've made it through the first 3 parts of Rome's long, slow, existential crisis. At this point in the empire's story, it's less about dramatic battles and more about paperwork. Lots of paperwork. Taxes, bureaucracy, imperial micromanagement. The thrilling stuff of empire collapse. Let's get comfortable, take a slow breath, and drift into the next soft, crumbling chapter of the Roman saga. So, we're somewhere around the 3rd century, maybe shading into the 4th. Rome is still technically huge. On a map, it looks impressive, stretching from the sands of Africa to the damp forests of Britain. But behind that imperial facade, everything is wobbling like an over-baked pie. The economy, for one, is in free fall. The old system of conquest-based revenue has long since dried up. You can only plunder Gaul and Egypt so many times before people stop having things worth stealing. So Rome did what any respectable empire would do when running out of cash. It taxed absolutely everything that moved. And what didn't move. And sometimes people who weren't even technically alive anymore. Yes, records show that Rome in its later days tried taxing corpses. If someone died before paying their tax, the debt could be passed to their children, because apparently nothing says imperial stability than shaking down the dead. Now, about those taxes, they weren't simple. Rome's bureaucrats, bless their toga-wrapped souls, developed a system so complex that even they didn't fully understand it. Farmers had to deliver grain quotas, blacksmiths had to produce weapons, and merchants had to keep ledgers that probably made no sense even to the gods. The rich, of course, found ways to avoid all this. They always do. Wealthy landowners slipped out of obligations with bribes, exemptions, or by conveniently joining the clergy once Christianity gained traction. Nothing gets you out of taxes quite like a religious title. The middle and lower classes, though, they had no such luck. The state leaned heavily on them, demanding goods, labor, and loyalty. In return, they got very little besides collapsing infrastructure and the occasional bread dole if they lived in Rome. Speaking of bread, let's talk about the bread and circuses. It's one of those phrases everyone knows, but few people realize how literal it was. The Roman government, especially in its later years, handed out free grain to the poor to keep them from revolting. Alongside that, they provided endless public entertainment, chariot races, gladiator fights, animal hunts, a steady stream of distraction. The idea was simple: keep people fed and entertained, and maybe they won't notice the empire crumbling around them. And for a while, it worked. People cared less about the tax system collapsing or the legions losing ground if they had free wheat and a front row seat at the Colosseum. But even the bread and circuses couldn't hold off decline forever. Eventually, when grain shipments from North Africa became unreliable, the rations dried up. And when the money to fund games vanished, so did the distractions. It turns out that when you remove both bread and circuses, people start asking uncomfortable questions. Let's drift a little now to the imperial court. Picture it: marble floors, silk curtains, endless courtiers whispering, and one exhausted emperor who doesn't really want to be there. That was the vibe in late Rome. By this point, emperors came and went faster than a Netflix renewal cycle. Assassinations, coups, forced abdications, it was a revolving door of power. Some emperors lasted a few years, others just a few months. One or two didn't even make it to their coronation day before someone decided they'd be better off not breathing. The military, which used to be Rome's greatest strength, had become a political tool. Generals fought each other for the throne, dragging their legions into civil wars that left borders undefended.
And when you're fighting yourself, well, the barbarians don't exactly wait politely. By the 4th century, the empire had split in two: the Western Roman Empire, based in Rome and later Ravenna, and the Eastern Roman Empire, based in Constantinople. This wasn't supposed to be permanent, just an administrative convenience. But as it turned out, the East got all the good stuff: wealth, trade, defensible geography. The West got barbarian invasions and debt. It's kind of like a messy divorce where one partner gets the mansion and the other gets the broken-down car. Constantinople flourished. Its walls were nearly impenetrable, and its economy thrived on Eastern trade routes. Meanwhile, the Western Empire was busy trying to hold on to what little it had left: Gaul, Hispania, bits of Africa, and of course, Italy itself. But it was like trying to carry water in a sieve. Let's pause for a moment and picture a typical Roman town in the 5th century. The forums cracked, the temples are half empty, statues are missing noses and arms, the aqueducts still stand, but the water flow is unreliable. Merchants are nervous, soldiers are underpaid, and no one's quite sure who's in charge this week. It's not exactly the shining glory of Augustus's Rome. And speaking of Augustus, remember him? The first emperor, the golden boy of Roman order and efficiency. He'd probably have a stroke if he saw what his empire had become. Because by now, the emperors weren't ruling with any real power. Most were puppets, controlled by generals, advisors, or even their own guards. The Praetorian Guard, once tasked with protecting emperors, had become the empire's most unpredictable kingmakers. If you had their support, you might rule. If you didn't, well, you'd better hope your poison taster was on your side. Some emperors tried to fix things, of course. Diocletian, for instance, around 284 CE, decided that if one emperor couldn't manage the chaos, maybe four could. So he created the Tetrarchy, a system with 2 senior emperors and 2 juniors. It was ambitious, logical even. It also failed spectacularly the moment Diocletian retired. Turns out, emperors don't like sharing, especially not with other emperors. Within a decade, everyone was fighting again. Then came Constantine. Yes, that Constantine, the one who legalized Christianity and founded Constantinople. He brought some stability back, but mostly to the east. The west continued to wobble. And wobble. And wobble. Until it finally fell over completely. But before we reach that grand, inevitable finale, let's linger here a bit. In the slow, bureaucratic decay of Rome, the taxes kept rising, the army became increasingly filled with non-Roman recruits, Germanic mercenaries often better paid and better treated than the citizens they were supposed to protect. Ironically, some of these mercenaries would later lead the invasions that toppled Rome itself. It's like hiring your own replacement centuries ahead of schedule. The urban population dwindled as trade collapsed. Aristocrats fled to their countryside villas, turning them into little self-sufficient estates. Over time, these estates became the blueprint for medieval feudalism. Rome didn't really fall in one grand explosion, it just slowly transformed into something else. A quieter, poorer, more local world. Let's float over to another image, a symbolic one. The Senate. Still technically existing, still dressing in white togas, still pretending they mattered. They met in a half-empty curia, discussing laws that no one obeyed anymore. Their debates were echoes, their power long gone. Outside, on the streets, the once proud city of 1 million people had shrunk to a fraction of that number. The Colosseum was crumbling, the public baths closed, the fountains dry. And yet, people stayed. They lived among the ruins quietly, almost peacefully, as history shifted around them. The end, when it came, wasn't a bang. It was a sigh. But we'll drift into that in the next part. For now, let's rest here, in the twilight of empire, where marble turns to dust, and the idea of Rome still lingers, stubborn and fading. Stay cozy. The fall is quite finished yet.
Hey, welcome back, Night Owl.
if you've made it this far into the story, you deserve an imperial laurel crown, preferably one made of soft pillows. Tonight, we drift into the final act of the Roman Empire's very long, very awkward decline. The part where everything sort of falls apart, but in slow motion, like a very tired cake collapsing under its own weight. So, dim the lights, take a deep breath, and let's quietly shuffle through the last few centuries of Rome's life when barbarians stopped being them and started becoming us. The 5th century begins and things are not great. The Western Roman Empire is like an overworked office manager trying to hold a meeting while the building is literally on fire. The legions, scattered. The treasury, empty. The borders, more of a vague suggestion at this point. And those so-called barbarians, they're not just raiders anymore. They're entire nations on the move. Goths, Vandals, Franks, Huns, all flooding across the old frontiers. Some are running from other invading tribes, others just want a slice of farmland and maybe a warm bath. It's chaos, but a strangely organized chaos. Let's start with the Visigoths. They were originally allies, or at least they were supposed to be. Rome had let them settle inside the empire's borders as federates, meaning they'd farm, pay taxes, and theoretically help defend the place. Unfortunately, the Roman officials in charge of them were the usual mix of corrupt, arrogant, and wildly incompetent. They underpaid the Goths, mistreated them, and acted shocked when the Goths got a bit stabby. In 378 CE, the situation exploded into the Battle of Adrianople. The Eastern Roman army marched confidently to teach the Goths a lesson and got utterly annihilated. Emperor Valens was killed, the legions were destroyed, and Rome realized, probably for the first time, that the barbarians weren't just a nuisance anymore. They were a real existential problem. Fast forward a few decades and we meet one of the empire's most famous guests, Alaric the Visigoth. Alaric had a complicated relationship with Rome. He'd served in the Roman army, been snubbed for promotion, and decided, quite reasonably, to burn the place down. After years of negotiating, marching, and being betrayed by imperial politics, Alaric finally got tired of playing nice. In 410 CE, he marched his army into the Eternal City. Rome, the city that hadn't been sacked in 800 years, was looted by barbarians. Now, to be fair, it wasn't quite the cinematic apocalypse people imagine. The Visigoths didn't burn the city to the ground or slaughter everyone in sight. They looted, sure, but mostly took portable things. Gold, silver, maybe some fine furniture, maybe a few statues. It was a polite sacking as far as sackings go. Still, symbolically, it was devastating. The world had just witnessed the unthinkable. Rome, humbled. St. Jerome, writing in Bethlehem, said it felt like the light of the world had gone out. A bit dramatic, but he wasn't wrong. After Alaric's death, reportedly from a fever, because irony never sleeps, the Visigoths moved on to Gaul and Spain. Meanwhile, the empire kept stumbling along. Emperors came and went, usually by murder or military coup. One bright spark, Emperor Majorian tried to reform things around 457 CE, fixing tax abuse, repairing the navy, and planning a reconquest of Africa. Naturally, he was executed by his own generals within 4 years, because Rome had long passed the point where competence was acceptable behavior. Speaking of Africa, that's where the Vandals enter the story. The Vandals had made their way from Central Europe to Spain and then across into North Africa, led by their king Gaiseric. They took Carthage in 439 CE and made it their capital. From there, they built a surprisingly efficient kingdom and a pirate fleet that terrorized the Mediterranean. At one point, they even sailed right into Italy and sacked Rome again in 455 CE. This time, it was less polite looting and more wholesale theft of anything that wasn't nailed down. The word vandalism comes from this event, though to be fair, they didn't do much actual destruction. They just stole everything shiny. Still, if your city gets sacked twice in 45 years, it's probably time to rethink your empire strategy. Let's drift now to the north, to the Huns. They were a whole different problem, a nomadic powerhouse sweeping across Europe like a fast-moving storm. And at the center of that storm was Attila the Hun. Attila wasn't interested in subtlety. He demanded tribute, gold, and respect, and usually got all three. For a while, he focused on the Eastern Empire, shaking Constantinople down for massive sums of money. When that got boring, he turned west, rampaging through Gaul and northern Italy. Pope Leo I famously met with him in 452 CE, supposedly persuading Attila to turn back. We don't know exactly what was said. Maybe divine inspiration, maybe just some good old-fashioned bribery. Either way, the Huns withdrew. And then Attila died the next year, allegedly of a nosebleed on his wedding night. A rather unglamorous end for the Scourge of God. By now, Rome was little more than a brand name. The emperors in Ravenna, the new western capital, chosen because it was swampy and harder to invade, were emperors in title only. Real power belonged to military strongmen like Ricimer and Orestes, who made and unmade emperors like bad reality show contestants. And then, in 476 CE, it happened. The moment everyone points to as the fall of the Roman Empire. The emperor at the time was Romulus Augustulus, a teenager installed by his father Orestes. His name was a cosmic joke, Romulus after Rome's mythical founder, and Augustus after its first emperor, the ultimate full circle. A Germanic general named Odoacer, tired of taking orders from Romans who barely ruled anything, marched into Ravenna and told Romulus to pack it up. He didn't kill him, which was unusually polite. He just sent him to a villa in Campania with a pension. And just like that, the Western Roman Empire was gone. No dramatic battle, no final stand, just a resignation letter, a shrug, and some paperwork. Odoacer declared himself ruler of Italy, technically under the authority of the Eastern Emperor Zeno. And people, well, they carried on. The Senate still met occasionally, the city still existed, life just sort of shifted. If you were a farmer in Gaul or a craftsman in Rome, you might not have even noticed the moment your empire vanished. It had been fading for so long that the final step was almost peaceful. The Roman Empire didn't die in fire, it exhaled. Meanwhile, in the East, the empire that called itself Roman would go on for another 1,000 years. The Byzantines, as we call them now. They'd carry the torch, the titles, and the bureaucracy long after the Western Empire turned into medieval kingdoms. But that's another long, sleepy story for another night. So here we are, at the quiet end of one of the greatest stories in human history. An empire that conquered the known world, built wonders, wrote laws, and left behind roads that still exist today. Undone not by one catastrophe, but centuries of small human mistakes. Greed, pride, incompetence, exhaustion. A death by 1,000 little bureaucratic paper cuts. And somehow, through all of it, the idea of Rome never really disappeared. It lingered in languages, in cities, in law, and in dreams. Even today, every capital that calls itself the New Rome, from Constantinople to Moscow to Washington, D.C., still feels the shadow of the old one. Because Rome, in its strange way, never fell completely. It just changed form. And with that, dear listener, our long, drowsy journey through the fall of the Roman Empire comes to a close. So, close your eyes, drift back from the marble ruins, and let the echoes of history fade into soft silence. Because even empires need their rest.
Still awake? Or maybe half drifting somewhere between history and dreams? That's okay. This part isn't about emperors or invasions. It's about what happens after the fall. The quiet, lingering afterglow of an empire that refused to disappear completely. So settle in. Let the world fade for a while.
We're heading into the long twilight, the time after Rome, when the ghosts of the empire still wandered through its ruins. When Rome, quote, fell in 476, the world didn't reset. There was no sudden darkness, no apocalyptic silence. The sun rose the next day. People got up, fed their animals, argued about bread prices, and went about their lives. The marble columns still stood, the aqueducts still trickled, and Latin, that fussy, elegant language of emperors, kept whispering through the streets. Rome had been an empire for so long that even without the emperors, it couldn't really stop being Rome. The cities became smaller, the trade routes thinned, roads crumbled, sure, but the memory of them, of Roman order, lingered like an echo that never fully faded. Let's float to Italy, now quiet, rural, and strangely peaceful. Among the ruins, small communities carried on. Bishops replaced governors, churches replaced temples. The old Roman aristocrats still sipped wine in their villas, pretending the empire hadn't collapsed. And in a way, it hadn't. It had just changed management. The church became the new Rome. It borrowed the empire's structure, its hierarchy, even its language. Pope after pope would sit in the same city that once crowned emperors, using the same titles, wearing the same robes, sending letters written in the same polished Latin. Rome had stopped ruling armies, but it kept ruling minds. Further north, the so-called barbarians were busy reinventing themselves. The Franks in Gaul, the Visigoths in Spain, the Ostrogoths in Italy, all of them started dressing like Romans, building like Romans, and governing like Romans. They kept the laws, the administration, even the coins, just with their own faces stamped on them. Because deep down, they didn't want to replace Rome, they wanted to be Rome. Meanwhile, over in Constantinople, the Eastern Roman Empire, or as it still proudly called itself, just the Roman Empire, things kept ticking along. The emperors there saw the fall of the West as more of a regional inconvenience. They still sent out ambassadors, issued edicts, and fought wars in the name of the empire that had begun on the Tiber centuries earlier. And their city, Constantinople, was everything old Rome used to be: wealthy, cosmopolitan, and full of marble. Its walls held strong for nearly 1,000 more years. The Byzantines, as we call them, spoke Greek, prayed in domed churches, and spent half their time trying to outdo the memory of their ancestors. To them, Rome wasn't dead, it just lived by the sea now. Even in the so-called Dark Ages, Rome's light didn't really go out, it just dimmed. Roman law became the foundation of European justice. Roman roads shaped future cities. Roman engineering, arches, domes, and concrete quietly survived in monasteries and cathedrals. Even the way people thought about power, emperors, crowns, nations, was soaked in Roman nostalgia. Every ruler wanted that same aura, that imperial glow. And eventually, in 800 CE, someone decided to make it official again. Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, as the Holy Roman Emperor. Yes, that Holy Roman Empire. The one Voltaire would later say was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But you have to admire the dedication. Even after 3 centuries, people still couldn't let go Rome. It was too big, too grand, too perfect an idea to truly die. Over time, Rome became a kind of mythic inheritance, a thing every power wanted to claim. The Ottomans called themselves Caesars of the East. The Russian czars claimed to be the heirs of Byzantium, the Third Rome. Even the modern world, with its republics and parliaments, can trace its architecture, language, and laws straight back to that ancient city. Walk through Washington, D.C., London, or Paris.
Those marble columns, domed roofs, and Senate chambers all whisper the same thing. Rome never left us. But perhaps the most enduring part of Rome isn't the buildings or the laws, it's the idea of endurance itself. The empire's story became a mirror, a warning, a comfort, and a dream. Historians still argue over why it fell. Some say corruption, some say Christianity, some say the barbarians, some say lead poisoning. But maybe, like most human things, it just got tired. Everything that grows eventually softens, and even an empire needs to sleep. If you could stand in the Roman Forum today, at twilight, when the tourists are gone and the air turns soft, you'd still feel it. The faint hum of something that once ruled the world. The marble arches catching the last gold light. The broken columns standing like sentinels, still proud even in ruin. And somewhere in the quiet dust, you'd almost hear it. The heartbeat of an empire that refuses to fade completely. Because Rome isn't really a place anymore. It's an idea. And ideas, as history tends to prove, are much harder to kill. So as you drift off tonight, remember, the fall of Rome wasn't the end. It was the world taking a slow breath, preparing to dream something new. Good night, traveler of time, and sleep well among the ruins.
And so, here we are, at the quiet end of one of history's longest, slowest declines. The Western Roman Empire didn't fall in a single battle or sudden catastrophe. It faded, gradually, relentlessly, through economic strain, political chaos, invasions, and the subtle erosion of what once made it strong. Its emperors came and went, often powerless. Its borders were stretched too thin. Its citizens tried to survive amid corruption and decay. And yet, Rome never truly vanished. Its laws, its roads, its language, and its ideas quietly shaped the world that followed. From Constantinople in the east to the kingdoms of medieval Europe, the echo of Rome lingered. Every empire that arose afterward, every legal system, every monumental building, every claim to glory carried a piece of that ancient city's legacy. So, the story of Rome is not just a story of collapse, it's a story of endurance, transformation, and the surprising resilience of human ideas. Even in ruins, Rome still whispers. If you've enjoyed drifting through the rise, the struggles, and the slow twilight of the empire with me tonight, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so we can continue wandering together through the long, winding corridors of history. Thanks for watching, and remember, even the greatest empires can fall, but their stories last forever.